Hi, good evening. Um, my name is Attukwei Clottey, as Marina has done most of the talking. Thank you so much. Thank you, Brighton. Um, I'll quickly go straight to my presentation, and I'm glad to be here. I think it's a very wonderful opportunity for me to be in Brighton because Brighton has been one of the dream schools to study, but, well, it happens to be a presentation, so that's great. First of all, my work deals with migration, politics, and environmental situations. And I studied art in Brazil. I studied art in Ghana for 4 years, and I had a scholarship to study art in Brazil, which was like, wow, Brazil, and Ghana is an English-speaking country. So you can imagine, I studied in Brazil for 3 months, but it was very intense. I had to go to school like every single time. I was exposed to certain subject that, like, back in Ghana, I was like, what? Nobody wants to do this, But I took the privilege, and, well, my work has evolved over time. I started working by myself in my studio. My dad is an artist, but we think very differently. My dad is interested in painting, impressions, very traditional. And having to study in Brazil, I became more contemporary, and so I'm interested in dealing with situations which none of the galleries back in Ghana was interested in, politics and art, no way. So I decided to move out from my dad's studio and focus on how best I can be an artist. Yeah. So first and foremost, I work with these gallons for the past 15 years at a very early age because they are available materials that I can explore as an artist. Because when I was growing up in Ghana as an artist, there was no way, as a young artist, you can survive with your art. It's never possible, But I was working with my dad. I paint a lot for my dad, so it gives me an idea that there's always a way through, So after I got back from Brazil, 2006, I realized that these yellow containers, which represent problem, because when I was growing up, you have to carry these like kilometers to fetch water for the family. And as a boy, that is your responsibility, So when I was growing up, this represents a problem. But when I started thinking about art, I realized that this can be a solution. But the only way is to be more critical about that container. So what I did was, I started collecting these gallons. I mean, for me, it looked like a canvas. So I put them together and paint on them like a mirror or something. But I realized that consumption became a problem, even storage, because each gallon has about 25 liters and 20 liters. So imagine having like 20 pieces. You run out of space. And then you are living with your parents, and you don't pay anything, and you consuming these gallons. Yeah, so then I took a very critical idea as to cutting them to reduce the volume and still manipulate the consumption, So I started cutting them but then I was working by myself. So my first piece took me a year and a half because I had no money. I was just cutting with hand saw, no drillers. I was using nails and all. So my first piece took me like a year and a half. And I thought like, there's no way I can do this, if I can produce one piece in a year, what's the point? But I managed to find my way because I'm originally a painter. So what I did was I was selling my painting to the galleries to make money to work on this because this is like self-fund projects. And what happened was when I realized that I want to focus on more critical situations and within politics and art, I decided to stop selling from the gallery. So I told them no. If they are not interested in the plastic, they are not interested in very narrative work. So what they did was they were not interested. So I told them, I'm not painting anymore. This is what I want to do. If you don't accept this, I'm done. So I went to some of the galleries and just collect my work from them. So then I realized I managed to use the social media platforms because there is no way I can sell any of this plastic work. So what I did was I went to online galleries. That's the opportunity that has brought me this far. It's taking advantage of social media. So what I did was I was just uploading my images, my process and everything, And I get response from galleries, museums, websites, different, institutions writing to me to ask about the story of this work. So that is how it all started. So now, I moved into Latin. I was living in a very decent, quiet, but I realized that it's the kind of subject that I'm interested in doesn't really relate to the people around. They are not interested in waste management, nothing. So I moved into this space where I realized that the locals are dealing with situations that can be addressed through my subjects. So I started working with the community. But then I was working by myself. But I realized that the community is so much interested in my practice because I was carrying the gallon by myself, and they were curious, what is this guy using these materials for? Because it's used to survive water. And originally, this can is used for transporting cooking oil from the West to Africa. Then we use, after the oil, because oil is a need, then we started storing water in them, which has become a major issue of health and other environmental degradations. So what I did was, I had to give them an educational background of that object, that this represents a problem. So what we have to do is we have to find a way to get rid of this in the system and go back to the traditional way of storing water, which is the clay pot and all that. That is the only way I managed to get the community involved, because when I was cutting them, there was a whole conflict that there's this person here cutting the gallon that we need to survive water. So there has to be a presentation of my practice, what I do, and what I use them for. So I actually got the community involved. So I started with cousins, and few friends. Now the work has involved that I have like about 15 assistants, and I have about 100 collectives that we work together as a performing group. So this is actually at the dump site where we go to collect the gallon. And now the price of the gallon, we used to buy them, I think a kilo costs about £3, and now it's about £10 because of the value chain. They realize that these artists collect these materials anytime I buy them, and they don't see the end of the work. But now, through the social media engagement, they see the work, this work is in the US, this work in this museum, so that has changed the value of the gallons, which I find it very interesting because it has created a job for the community that goes around to collect them from dam side, from the shore, from the street, and everywhere. So that has created a job for the community. And so this is a dump site next to a gallery, that there's a huge dump site where people come to trade plastic. So when we are going to collect the gallons, I always find ways to engage the community in the dialogue. So what we do is that we dress like women. We wear women's clothes. Once you wear women's clothes, there's always a question. A man wearing a woman's clothes is always a question. And that's how we are able to maneuver the community through this practice. So I have my guys wearing their mom's clothes and their sister's clothes as well. So that's the routine that we do. Like once a week, we go to collect the gallons. Yeah, so this is where it's actually on the ocean, which is quite very dangerous. So we collect them from the ocean back to the city. But therefore, we manipulate it and change the form and the value of it. Yeah, these are some of the dialogue that we create, like with the lipstick and all that. So it makes the community curious and want to understand what this is about. So now we have the whole entire community being part of the process. So I wake up in the morning, I have like 20 gallons in front of mine because they are trying to get rid of it. Yeah, so that's the routine on the streets. And it's quite interesting because Labadi, when he talks about sexuality, there's always a kind of weird situation. But through the performance, we are able to, discuss that it's not about, it's about right. This is what I feel comfortable with, and that is my right. So in a way, we play around several subjects within the process. Yeah, so this is the process that we go through. So this is not about just an artist working by myself, but it's actually a community-built project. Yeah, so 2013, 2012, I invited a couple of my community people, because most of the time they see interviews online, they see on the news, and they don't actually know what I do in my space. So they approached me sometime and they said, okay, I think we can work with you because your work seems very political and we also have a voice, but we don't have the platform to execute that. And I said, okay. Okay, so the first performance together with my collective was Whose Puppet Are You? And the name of the performance group is GoLokal Collective because it's actually a local-based community, people coming together to express themselves through performance art. So this was one of our very first performance that actually got me scared if I want to still be an artist or not. It's very political, and Whose Puppet Are You? 2012 is the year that I got to really understand how art can collide with politics, because there was a huge tension between these two strong parties during 2012 election, and everybody was scared. And I was in the position where, because I'm an artist, I was dragged different sides to campaign because I have the artistic mind and I share ideas. Okay, this is how to design the poster, the T-shirts for all these campaigns. So what happened was that I realized that I'm just supporting that situation because of my own self. Because once they come to power, they don't even remember the role Attukwei played as an artist or his ideas in this political position. So what we did was, 4 days before election, we went on the streets, like it was in the night, because we had to peel all these political posters, and it's not allowed to do that during the day, or you are not allowed to do that. So we're working during the night, middle of the night. We went to the printing press to collect some of the posters, and I created a costume which I represent the youth, and each of the guys imitate a political candidate. That was 4 days before election, and there was a huge tension. There was police siren everywhere, and we had to do the performance because we have to risk ourselves to demonstrate how the youth is used as a puppet during political campaigns. So this is the performance in the middle of the streets. And the costume, which is made from political posters, so it has different political images as well as. So the briefcase represents money, and what it does is they always give money during elections. They sponsor everything, they pay for everything, but after they come back to their positions, you can't find them. You can't even reach out to them. So this is demonstration of, and yeah, so this is another performance that we did. So through the community engagement with my work, it's become very radical as to selecting subjects and ideas and how to execute it. So Chinese get rich, local go mad. That was 2014. And it was about the illegal mining that Chinese is taking over African gold. Yeah, and it's because it's illegal, you don't see the process of it. You only see the negative part of it, and you see death and bad pollution in our waters and all that. So what I did was, I did a few research within the local community, and we managed to build all this equipment that they use, because what they did was they employed the local as laborers to mine the gold. And there are children involved in the mining, because some of the pits, it's very small for, to kids to just go through. So this was done on the beach, just around my house. And because Ghana was known as a gold coast, we are curious if you can still find gold on the coast. So about 5 hours, we're just mining on the beach. I asked the kids just to look for gold. They have no idea what gold looks like. But in their mind, it's a very precious stone that's worth, So 5 hours. And after 5 hours, some of the kids were very tired. And what we did was, we have people filming. And people actually, the elders of the community thought we were actually mining gold. So they went to the chief to report that there is this artist who has brought people to mine gold on the beach. So that's created a whole conversation, and I was even scared because the chief was actually looking for me there, if I had some gold. Yeah, so this is how we get the community to be very cautious about what is happening and how the performance arts can be radical in subject. Yeah, so and these are the kids. They ask me, they pick anything, they pick shiny, ask me, is this gold? I said, just look for gold. Yeah. So that was very interesting because I work with children because they have like different understanding as to performance, and it's a way of developing them to understand how to deal with situations by using yourself as an example. Yeah, so that was, and the displays, the performance I did from the beginning, it's something about migration that it's reference to global migration, but it's my family history of migration. My family is from Jamestown. Jamestown is the British Accra, where there's the British settle and they build the fort. And we migrate to Labadi, which is two towns on the coast. And in between the migration, there was a trade. So migration, it somehow came about the global migration of years ago. So they were trading alcohol and beef, and that was what they were trading. So the nets represent in between Jamestown on the coast to Labadi. In between, they fish, and they survive from the fish because they need food in between that time. And the plastic containers is reference to the jugs used for storing alcohol. So they were trading alcohol and beef on the coast. That was what they drew. And out of the benefit of the migration is that we got to settle in La. So originally, I'm not from La. I'm from Jamestown. So this happened about 200 years ago, and I'm the 6th generation. And there was the benefit of the migration, the trade was that the chief of that time gave my family a huge land to settle because of the trade relationship they had. That was 200 years ago. But now, the problem was that because there was no documentation of that history, that it was just verbal agreement. It's not written, it's not documented. So now we are going through the situation whereby the people of that town has begun to invade our space. So what I did was, so I tried to create, because I keep asking the elders that, okay, what was the story about our migration? So I had to come out with a video that can be used as a reference for the coming generation. So we staged a performance on the beach. The idea was to stage from Jamestown on the boat all the way to Labadi. But during that season, it was raining, so I don't think it's safe. We tried. We get about half a kilometer, and the tide was really dangerous. And we have kids in the canoe, so we have to come back. So we're hoping that we can achieve that in a few years. Yeah, so this is the installation. So what happened was, this is where they trade. So the sculptures are found broken boats. So what I do was, I go around the coast to collect broken boats, because broken boats represent migration. They are very element in migration. Boats and the sea is used to navigate the world. So I created the sculptures that symbolize the moment where the trade was taking place. So that's my family, and that's the people. And the boats represent the meat they were trading, because the people of La always meet my family on the beach, and they do the transaction, and they go back until they settle. Okay, so yeah, this is one of my mother's wardrobe. It's one of my very personal project that I realized that it's affecting a lot of people traditionally. And so my mother's wardrobe, it's about my late mom and how tradition questioned human rights in a way. So what happened was that I lost my mom 2014, and I traveled after the funeral and all that. But when I came back after a year, her property or her belongings was shared among the siblings. And I felt very disappointed, because I'm the only child, and I need to at least get something that I can connect with my mom. But they told me, oh, in our tradition, the boy or the man doesn't get any of her mom's belongings. So I felt very disconnected from my mom, because my mom has played a very major role in my career, but also helping collect the gallons and telling friends, okay, my son needs the gallons to work with. So what I did was, I had to find a way to discuss that situation by using performance art. And I went to my mom's siblings, and I told them, I need my mom's clothes, some of my, at least a fabric. And, they didn't understand what I needed. So I just told them, okay, I need this to do a performance. What is? Yeah, so they gave me one traditional women's clothes from fabric, and I had to work with my collective, and asking men to wear women's clothes is never possible. It took us like a month to convince them that it's not about women, it's not about men, it's about rights, to wear women's clothes. And there's a question of fabric. What does fabric means in gender? Because there are certain fabric that belongs to women, and, like, how do we question that? Who defines what belongs to men and who defines? So it took us like a month and a half to convince them that this is something that, so I realized that they were also going through the same situation, that they've lost their mom and they have nothing from their mom, so we had to come out with this performance called My Mother's Wardrobe. So I asked each of them to go to look for their mom's clothes. And I'm interested in fabric and how fabric has changed over time from tradition to contemporary design. And then, so we did a performance starting from the community. So after a month, we managed to understand the whole concept of like My Mother's Wardrobe. And then they realized that it's not about sexuality. So what they did, they began to dress from home. I was surprised. I was expecting them to bring the clothes in my studio to start, but they started dressing from the street. And even their friends were helping them dress up. So we did this performance at a hotel called Kempinski, which has a gallery in 1957. And this is how, men wearing women's clothes. So that was one of the most challenging performances in the community. But now they understand how tradition questions human rights in a way, because we all have rights, and wearing women's clothes doesn't define who you are. It's a choice, and it's your right. So we did a performance on that called My Mother's Wardrobe. Yeah, so I'm interested in defining my identity. Either I come from Jamestown or I come from Labadi, because my practice has been centered in Labadi because I was born there, but we have a migration background coming from Jamestown. So La 360 is to tie up the history of La. La is a suburb of Accra, and it's on the coast. And there was this history, how Labadi, it's La, but it's now called Labadi, Labad, because the British years ago was trying to build a fort, and the people of La never allowed them. So they were called La, but after they destroyed that structures, British start to call them Labadi. It means La people are bad. So the name has become Labadi. Yeah. But if you are from La, you can say Labadi. But if you are not from there, you have to say La, because it's not allowed. Yeah. So I decided, because the community has been like a collaborator in my practice, and for the past years, I've done quite a few installations and performances around the community. But most of the time, anytime I have a show abroad, I manage to show the work few days in the community before the work migrates, because the work somehow go to different space in which it's limited to people, So what I do is I do an installation in the community for a couple of days before the work migrates. But I realized that the community has been so much interested in my practice, and they've seen how that has developed the community, that has created jobs, that has brought a lot of attention into that space. So I came out with La 360, means La 360 degrees, like the stories around La and how we can create a whole festival within our traditional festival. So 360 La happened on the 25th of August in Accra, in La, where during that time there was a traditional festival, and that particular time of the month, there's Band of Sound. In that festival is very, very traditional, that when they say there's no sound, for the next 4 weeks, no sound. No sound means no music. You can't even fry fish in the mat. No using tools and all that. It has to be quiet. And there is a very specific traditional song that is sang, not like verbal songs. And it's very political. It's to address the issues that has happened politically in the past years, what is happening within the local government and all that. So it's very, very important time. So we managed to bring the festival in between that so that we can reflect on our traditional way of performance and bringing that into contemporary realization. So that's me in one of my costumes. So whenever there is a performance, it's a time of transition where I become a very different person. So I managed to get my collective into that moment because they're not sure what is happening. From the beginning, when we go to festivals to perform, when we get ready on the procession, everybody gets quiet. There's no talking. Everybody gets really, really intense, and we use our body as a communication barrier. So this was the festival that took place in La, and this leaf, I don't know the English name, but it's called Ghanian. It's a very powerful leaf that we use in our traditional sacrifices, and during that time, it's used for spiritual bath. It's used for cleansing. If you are sick and they put this leaf in water, it can be used to cure whatever sickness it is. So it's a very important plant that we use during that time. So what we did was we take some elements, very important elements in our tradition into contemporary approach. So that is why I have, and the marks, it's something that represents my work because working with this for the past 15 years, it's something that has been part of who I am. And it represents humans as well. It represents the problem. But now we are changing the understanding of that object to make it very beneficial to the country. So I use that. It's called the Afrogallonism marks. And that is a made-up word. And it's about how this originally come from the West that we have claimed. And it represents Africa. Anytime you see gallons, it tells you there is water scarcity in Africa. But originally, it comes from the West. So how do we transport this back to the West? By changing the form and value of it, where Africa benefits from that transaction. So Afrogallonism, Afro, for me, is a colonial word attached to African migrants. And this object comes from the West. And we have claimed. So Afro represents migrants. And this is not African migrants. But us realizing the possibilities of manipulating this back and trade back to the West become Afrogallonism. That's the concept of Afro. So this is one of the procession in the community. And during that time, because it was Band of Sound, we have to find a way. And it's surprisingly, the elders of the community has no idea that we have something coming up. It's a very interesting performance. And this is one of the most powerful images that I realized that if you see the picture, they have the foreigners here, sighted, taking photographs, and here you have the locals. That is the whole picture, and I think it's a very powerful because you can see how community engagement in art brings a lot of attention to tourists, because they are excited because they know the artist, but the community, therefore, it's in a way surprised, like they are very curious because they live in a community where they are not familiar with this, so this is something to bring attention to how best we can come together and develop the community through art. So that was this performance, La 360. And you can see there are very symbolic things which we use. These are the sacks for transporting rice and, other commodities. And we use a lot of powder, but it's interesting how this space kind of define my performance because if it's public or it's back home, it's going to be very different. So space sometimes limits certain ideas and all that. Yeah, but this space, I think I was trying to be very decent in my presentation, but back home in Ghana, it's really a big deal of performance. Yeah, and this is one. So the idea was actually exhibiting my work, and it turned out to be like a whole festival in which the people of La has accepted that they want this to happen every single year because it becomes our identity as well as our space. Yeah. So my sculptures. Yeah, so this is the gallons that we cut. We now I'm interested in technology and how we use technology to define space. So these are mappings of where I'm from. And I use this plastic as a reference. And also the idea of Google Maps, how Google Maps works. Because now, because of technology, if you're looking for anywhere, you can find it once you go online. But there are places in La that if you try using the Google Map, you end up in someone's room. And yeah, so in a way, I came out with this map, which is referencing to the space that I grew up. And yeah, and it has some numbers which is reference to barcode, because we are interested in the gallon, not only the value of it or what we benefit, but also to navigate where it comes from. So we have barcode that numbers that navigate where it comes from. Some may come from the US, some may come from even Nigeria, so we play with all those informations as well. Yeah, so these are like maps of places that we actually collect the gallon as well. Yeah, so we go through different, it's quite labor intense because we carry them on our back, bring them to the studio, and we catch every single piece. And now that I have the privilege to afford cutting tools as well as little equipment to the process, I think it's and when I visited a few days ago, they took me to the workshops, and I find very interesting machines that I wish I had back home, because it could help deal with this plastic. But anyways, we are in the process of that. So it takes a form of like the kente fabric. In a way, it looks like fabric because kente is a very important hand-woven cloth from the 20th century, and it's a very strong symbolic Ashanti. Okay, so this is work in progress. So now I realize how people deal with the plastic, because we don't have like proper plastic infrastructures, and so people melt the plastic, and it causes a lot of environmental hazards. So what we do was we go and collect traces of this plastic that from the dump site, and bring them to the studio, and we also kind of infuse them into this wire mesh. It's the idea of trying to create a very functionable house by using this, because once you're able to get the structures, you can use the plastic to build mobile houses. So it's a work in progress. We are still trying to understand how best we can create affordable mobile houses for the community. Yeah, so coming from a painting background, there's always an idea of drawings, and I started this series of drawing called Sex and Politics. My work is very political, so I find, and Sex and Politics means that it's a research on how sex is used as a currency. Sex is used for transaction. You don't need the physical money. So what I do is that I go on social media a lot. I'm always on social media. And I realized that Ghana is very religious, but when it comes to social media presence, we lose that religious conduct, because people post naked picture of themselves and they still go to church, but because it's a social media platform and it's not discussing church, and that is cool. So I go on social media and, take these images and compose them in a very abstract way to address that issue. And so these are my drawings. It deals with sexuality and all that. So those are all social media platforms, because social media has taken like 100% of our life, if I may say. And those are the things that I look out for on social media. Yeah, so, and last year, this is Kusungbo, which means tradition never dies. So in my practice, as much as it's contemporary, there's always tradition rooted in my work. And this is a commissioned piece by Facebook in San Francisco, and I installed this year in July. So because I'm interested in Facebook as an institution that brings people together, as well as, same as my practice, that bring the community together. On that piece, I work with the entire community on this particular commission, because I'm trying as much as possible to have traces of the community in different parts of the world. And Facebook space is something that because we are all addicted to Facebook in the community. So I have to do like a whole talk about this commission and, have their interest and see how best we can come out with the piece. And it's one of the biggest pieces I've ever made, which is about 23 feet by 60. Even that, we ran out of space, so we have to take the work from different locations to be able to put them together. And that was the piece. And it's actually the map of Labadi and how the lagoon flows into the ocean. There's part of Labadi where, and the history of that, my family fought against the next town, which is Teshin, it's next to Labadi, over that lagoon. Because the people, they want to acquire that space because it serves as food. It's very spiritual. It's a river goddess, which helps cure all kind of disease. And over time, in the name of development or modernity, that space was sold to foreigners to develop. So now we don't have food, we don't have crab seafood in that. And I think that has affected us as a community because we used to get free food from that lagoon. So it's a project that I'm working on to be able to use the plastic because they were dumping refuse like plastic, sand, all kind of things in there to acquire the land to develop. And that, because it's a river goddess, I believe that it has really been a curse to the people of Labadi. So what we did was we went to the lagoon to collect some of the plastic and we cut them. So the idea was to bridge these two, because it belongs to these two towns, but one has to fight against the other to acquire that space. So my interest was to bring these two towns together. If they were together, they wouldn't sell the piece of lagoon to foreigner. So this is the idea of this installation, and it's about 3 floors in San Francisco Lobby 8, and it's all about Labadi, the stories of Labadi, the 7 clans. So I indicate the 7 clans with the squares, and I have each of my assistants' name written on some of the gallons, like to be part of this work. Though it migrates to different spaces, but there's still a relationship with that work. So this is how I was installing. And there was this happening. This is the replication of how the lagoon flows and into the ocean. There's always like greeting each other every single day. Yeah, this is the detail shot. And so now, even when like people saw this commission, the copper wires that I collect has increased price, the gallons has increased price. So I think that I'm looking forward to what is going to happen the next year, because this will become a very valuable commodity with time. Yeah, so as I said, my family migration there, because there was no documentation of that piece of land given to by the chief, I started working on this project called Follow the Yellow Brick, which is from Wizard of Oz. And I'm trying to demarcate that property because even till now, my family doesn't have a proof or doesn't have a documentation for court, and they still go to court and it has to be a verbal agreement or whatever. So I came out with this to be able to demarcate that property which was given to my family. So that can be used in court. That documentation can be used in court. So this is, my family compound is the one above, if you can see. And this is like a map of La, where I live and where I collect the gallons. And the Artists Alliance is the biggest gallery in Accra. So I'll play a video of how we install the. I'm gonna play this video. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a short video how so this is the time, this is actually the Facebook piece. We installed the work outside for a couple of days before the work was shipped to Facebook. And this is, we did an interview with BBC London. They visited my studio and we had to do our whole routine of how the work take place and the process of the work. So this is the time that we go to the dump sites. The guys dress like women whilst I was doing the interview. So there's always, it becomes an activity in the town, in the community every single time. There's always something happening. We have visitors, like journalists coming inside. It's been a very busy space since I moved there and engaged the community. So this is the process. I have women. Yeah, I started working with men from the beginning because of the labor intensity of the process. But a couple of months ago, I have one lady who is brave, walked to my studio and said, I want to do it. And I was surprised. I'm like, really? He said, yeah, I can do it. So she became part of the assistants, and she's been doing really well. And I'm glad because I thought the process was quite difficult for women, but she was brave enough to walk into the studio and said, I want to work with you. So now I have my little sister who is also part of the studio assistants, and I'm looking forward to work with more women, and yeah. So these are shots of So the yellow brick is to give you an idea of the history of my family because people work on it, and this is a project till 2020. So we are trying to get the yellow brick all the way to the ocean because that was the kind of space was given to my family during the relationship they had with Labadi. And yeah, these are aerial shots of the process, and we are about 75% done, and yeah, we are looking forward to finish. So this documentation will go to my family archives and be used as a reference of what happened 200 years ago. Thank you.